Episode 2: The Nurse Who Saved a Rebel. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the refugee camp. Children ran between rows of tents. Women stood in line for water. Aid workers pushed carts through the muddy pathways. Daniel barely noticed any of it. He sat inside a temporary humanitarian office staring at a wooden box. The box was old, scratched, weathered, the kind of thing people usually threw away. An aid worker stood across from him. "I think these belong to you." Daniel frowned. "What is it?" The woman opened the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, folded, stacked, some stained by rain, some yellowed by age. Daniel's heart immediately began pounding. His hands moved before his mind could catch up. He picked up the first envelope, then froze. His name stared back at him. Daniel Mugenzi. The handwriting was familiar, painfully familiar. Amina. The room disappeared, the camp disappeared, the years disappeared. For several seconds, he simply stared, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to understand, because for years he had believed the letters stopped. Now he was looking at proof that they never had. The aid worker watched quietly. Who was she? Daniel looked down at the envelope, then smiled sadly. The reason I survived. History remembers wars through victories and defeats, maps, generals, battles, but survivors remember different things. A face, a promise, a voice in the darkness, a hand reaching toward them when everyone else walked away. When Mama Ruth ran through the forest that evening, she wasn't thinking about history. She wasn't thinking about politics. She wasn't thinking about rebels or governments. She was thinking about a dying young man, and a nurse she hoped would refuse to let him die. The clinic should have been closed. The final patient had left nearly an hour earlier. Amina sat alone behind her desk, reviewing inventory records by the light of a kerosene lamp. The numbers were depressing. Bandages were running low. Painkillers were running low. Antibiotics were running low. Everything seemed to be running low except patients. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The rainy season had arrived early, again. Amina sighed and rubbed her eyes. Then she heard pounding. Not knocking, pounding. Urgent, desperate. She immediately stood. Something was wrong. When she opened the door, Mama Ruth nearly fell inside. The old woman's chest rose and fell rapidly. Rainwater dripped from her clothing. Mud covered her feet. "Amina!" The elderly woman grabbed her arm. "You have to come." Amina's stomach tightened. What happened? A young man. What kind of injury? Mama Ruth hesitated, then lowered her voice. He was shot. The room became silent. Amina already knew what she was going to find. The battle earlier that day had been impossible to ignore. Everyone in Mukunzi had heard the gunfire. Everyone knew people had died. Everyone knew wounded men were probably scattered throughout the hills. Helping one could be dangerous. Helping the wrong one could be deadly. Mama Ruth seemed to read her thoughts. If we leave him there, he'll die. Amina looked toward the dark window. She remembered another storm, another night, another child fighting for his life, her little brother. She remembered a nurse opening a clinic door long after midnight, a nurse who chose to help. The decision came instantly. Show me where he is. The journey took nearly 40 minutes. The forest had become a swamp. Mud clung to their shoes. Branches clawed at their clothing. Twice Amina nearly slipped. Twice Mama Ruth caught her. Neither woman spoke much. The storm was loud enough for both of them. Eventually, they reached a clearing. Mama Ruth pointed. There. Amina immediately saw him. The young fighter lay motionless among wet grass and broken branches. Blood soaked through his uniform. His rifle rested several feet away. For a moment, she simply stared. Not because she was afraid, because he looked younger than she expected. Not a hardened revolutionary, not a military commander, not the monster politicians described during speeches. Just a wounded young man. Someone's son. Someone who probably still had a mother waiting for him somewhere. Amina knelt beside him, pulse weak, breathing shallow, skin cold, blood loss severe. He was dying. The realization came immediately. Without treatment, he wouldn't survive the night. Amina examined the wound. The bullet had passed through his upper leg. That was fortunate. A few centimeters higher, and he would already be dead. Still, the amount of blood worried her. So did the fever beginning to develop. So did the rain. So did everything. She looked at Mama Ruth. "We need to move him." The old woman nodded. "Can he survive it?" Amina glanced at the dark blood spreading through the makeshift bandage. "If we leave him here, he won't survive anything." Moving him almost killed all three of them. The stretcher they built from branches and blankets was crude. The path was steep. The mud was relentless. Several times Daniel lost consciousness entirely. Each time Amina checked his pulse. Each time she found it. Fainter, but still there, the same word kept appearing in her mind. Stubborn. Whoever this young man was, he seemed determined not to die. By the time they reached Mama Ruth's hut, all three were exhausted. Unfortunately, the hardest part was only beginning. The hut smelled of wood smoke and rain. Amina immediately got to work. There was no time to rest, no time to think, no time to second guess. She cleaned the wound, removed dirt, stopped bleeding, checked for fractures, monitored breathing, fought shock, fought infection, fought death itself. Hour after hour passed. The lantern burned lower. The storm continued outside. At some point, Mama Ruth handed her tea. Amina hadn't realized how badly she needed it. "When was the last time you ate?" the old woman asked. Amina thought, then frowned. "I don't remember." "That means too long." The tea was sweet, strong, perfect. 5 minutes later, she returned to work. The young fighter remained unconscious. Sometimes he muttered, sometimes he thrashed, sometimes he called out names. One appeared repeatedly, Samuel. Whoever Samuel was, he seemed important. Later he whispered another word, Mama. The word affected Amina more than she expected, because fever has a strange way of stripping people down to their essentials. No matter what uniform they wear, no matter what side they fight for, eventually everyone becomes somebody's child. Near dawn, she finally sat down. Her entire body ached. Daniel still slept. His fever remained high, but he was alive, for now. Mama Ruth lowered herself onto a stool. Neither woman spoke immediately. Finally, Amina broke the silence. "If anyone finds him here, we're in trouble." The old woman nodded. "I know. Government soldiers could accuse us of helping rebels." "I know. The whole village could suffer." "I know." Amina rubbed her eyes. "Then why did you bring me?" Mama Ruth looked toward the sleeping fighter. "Because he was dying." The answer was so simple, it left no room for argument. The old woman smiled. "Besides." "What?" "You would have helped him anyway." Amina hated how accurate that was. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Daniel drifted between fever and unconsciousness, fragments, dreams, pain, voices, memories. Sometimes he thought he was back in training camp. Sometimes he thought he was a child. Sometimes he thought he was already dead. Throughout all of it, one thing remained constant. A voice, calm, steady, stubborn. "Drink. Stay awake. Not yet. You're not dying today." He obeyed because he lacked the strength not to. On the 4th day, he finally opened his eyes and remained awake. The first thing he noticed was pain. The second thing he noticed was her. A young woman sat near the window reading medical notes. Sunlight touched one side of her face. When she noticed him watching, she lowered the papers. "Good." Daniel blinked. His throat felt like sandpaper. Good? A faint smile appeared. I was beginning to think you enjoyed making my job difficult. For the first time since the battle, he laughed. The movement hurt immediately, but somehow it felt worth it, because for the first time in days, he no longer felt alone. Daniel's first clear memory after waking was not the pain. It was the quiet, not silence. Quiet, there was a difference. Silence came after battles. Quiet came after survival. Rain dripping from a roof, water boiling over a fire, someone moving gently through a room, the sound of life continuing. He found himself listening to those sounds as Amina approached with a cup of water. Drink. He obeyed, mostly because she sounded like someone accustomed to being obeyed. After a few moments, she asked, "Name?" Daniel hesitated. War taught people to protect information. Names were dangerous. Names connected families, villages, histories, but she had already spent 4 days keeping him alive. Trust seemed unavoidable. "Daniel," she nodded. "Amina." The exchange was simple, yet somehow important, because now they were no longer a wounded fighter and a nurse. They were Daniel and Amina, two human beings sharing a small hut while the world outside tried to tear itself apart. Recovery was slow, painfully slow. Daniel hated every second of it. He hated needing help. He hated being unable to walk. He hated depending on strangers. The first time he tried standing, he nearly collapsed. Amina caught him before he hit the floor. "You see?" Daniel frowned. "See what?" "You're terrible at following instructions." Mama Ruth laughed from across the room. I told her the same thing. Daniel realized very quickly that the two women were impossible. Together, they were unstoppable. Days settled into a routine. Morning treatments, food, rest, conversations, more treatments, more conversations. At first they discussed practical things, the weather, the wound, the village. Eventually, the conversations grew longer, more personal. Amina learned Daniel once wanted to become a teacher. Daniel learned Amina became a nurse because someone saved her little brother's life. He found himself listening carefully whenever she talked, not because the stories were extraordinary, because she made ordinary things sound important. One evening they sat outside watching the sunset. The hills glowed orange. The rain had finally stopped. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Amina asked, "What did you want before the war?" Daniel thought. A long time. Finally he answered, "To teach." The admission surprised even him, because it was the first time he had said it aloud in years. Amina smiled. "You still can?" Daniel laughed softly. "After all this? Why not?" The simplicity of her answer startled him, because he had spent so long surviving that he had forgotten how to imagine a future. "What about you?" he asked. Amina looked toward the clinic. "A bigger hospital." "Hospital? Maybe clinic." "That sounds less ambitious." She laughed. "You have no idea how ambitious that is." Then she began describing it. Solar power, more beds, better equipment, a proper delivery room, enough medicine, enough staff, enough resources to help everyone who needed it. As she spoke, Daniel noticed something. Hope. Not naive hope. Determined hope. The kind that keeps people building even when the world keeps breaking things. He admired it immediately. The days passed, the wound improved, the fever disappeared, and something neither of them expected began happening. They started looking forward to conversations, then looking for excuses to continue them, then feeling disappointed when they ended. Neither mentioned it. Neither needed to. Some truths arrive quietly. On the 13th day, a village boy arrived carrying news. Rebel scouts were searching nearby, looking for survivors, looking for Daniel. The news should have made him happy. Instead, it created a strange feeling in his chest, because leaving suddenly felt difficult, not because of the wound, because of Amina. The rescue team arrived the next morning. 4 exhausted fighters emerged from the forest. One immediately embraced Daniel. Another checked the wound. The commander shook his head. "We thought you were dead." "So did I." Preparations began immediately. The scouts wanted to move quickly, too quickly. Within an hour, it was time to leave. Mama Ruth hugged him first. "You owe me firewood," Daniel laughed. "I haven't forgotten. You'd better not." Then she stepped aside, leaving only Amina. For a moment, neither spoke. 2 weeks. That was all. 2 weeks during a war. And yet it felt important. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Thank you," Amina smiled. "You've already said that." "Not properly." Silence followed. Then Daniel took a breath. "When the war is over..." The words stopped. Not because he didn't know them, because suddenly they felt enormous. Amina waited. Daniel continued. "When the war is over, I'll come back." The world seemed to disappear. The scouts, the trees, the village, everything, only the promise remained. "I'll come back," he repeated. "And thank you properly." Amina felt something tighten in her chest. Such a strange promise. Such a simple promise, yet somehow it felt bigger than either of them understood. She nodded. "Then survive long enough to keep it." Daniel smiled. The smile reached his eyes. "I'll try." The scouts called his name. Time had run out. Daniel adjusted his pack, turned, then walked toward the forest. After several steps, he looked back. Amina was still there, watching. He raised a hand. She did the same. Then he disappeared into the trees. Neither of them knew how long the war would last. Neither knew how many years stood between that promise and its fulfillment. Neither knew that letters would soon cross battle lines, that some would arrive and some would disappear forever. All they knew was that they had met, and that somewhere between medicine and survival, between rainstorms and lantern light, between a wounded rebel and a stubborn nurse, a promise had been made, and sometimes a promise is enough to keep hope alive.